Today I'll be talking about Nervi Vasorum, and I chose this topic because there's a lot of work that has been done on enteric nervous system, which is an analogy of the Nervi Vasorum, as both of them are outgrowths of the autonomic nervous system, one of which innervates the intestine and the other innervates the vascular system. So the earliest reference that I could come across for Nervi Vasorum was the book Chiropractors by D.D. Palmer, where he mentions that arthritis is basically an inflammation of the arteries, but is actually an inflammation of the nerves which innervate the arteries. The most recent reference that I could find was in the Wikipedia, where it mentions Nervi Vasorum as a outgrowth of the autonomic nervous system, which innervates the vascular system and is responsible for the tone of the blood vessels, and it maintains the blood pressure and the movement of blood in the blood vessels. So first we come to the origin of the Nervi Vasorum. So the origin of the Nervi Vasorum, as we know, comes from the autonomic nervous system and the neural crest cells specifically. And there have been a lot of experiments as the quail experiments and certain viral experiments and even radio ablation of the neural crest cells, where they studied the influence on the blood vessels. Specifically in the quail experiments, they replaced certain neural crest cells of the quail with the crest cells, and they came out with congenital deformities of the heart as well as the blood vessels, and they came to a conclusion that these neural crest cells are important in the mesodermal differentiation of the heart and the blood vessels. So what are the similarities between the enteric nervous system and the Nervi Vasorum? First, both of them come from the neural crest cells. Secondly, if you look at the structure of the Nervi Vasorum and the enteric nervous system, both of them are double layered. The outer layer is between the media and the adventitia and is responsible for the muscular differentiation and the elastin collagen ratio of the wall of the intestine or the blood vessel, and the inner layer is responsible for secretion of neurotransmitters, hormones, and several secretions which are very important for the health of the mucosa or the intima. So the Nervi Vasorum and the enteric nervous system can be divided into three layers, three parts actually. Just as we know that the gut is divided into the foregut, midgut, and the hindgut. In a similar manner, we can probably divide the Nervi Vasorum into the first part, which is from the ascending aorta up to the left subclavian artery, and this first part corroborates to the foregut. The second part from this left subclavian artery to the renal artery corroborates to the midgut, and the third part, which is from the renal artery down corroborates to the hindgut. And when I say that they corroborate to each other, it is the autonomic innervation that I mean. And this autonomic innervation, as we know, is craniosacral for parasympathetic and thoracolumbar for the sympathetic. So the midgut part, or the part from the left subclavian artery to the renal artery, is supplied by the thoracolumbar portion of the sympathetic nervous system, while portion from the ascending aorta to the left subclavian and the foregut is supplied by the cranial parasympathetic part, and the portion from the renal artery downwards and the hindgut is supplied by the pelvic splanchnic nerves, which are parasympathetic in origin. Why is this important to know? The reason is that we find that certain histopathological changes are selective for these embryological origins. I will give you a couple of examples, such as the ulcerative colitis is kind of restricted to the hindgut part. The aneurysms are mostly present in the infrarenal aorta and the ascending aorta and the arch of aorta, while an atherosclerosis is also prominent in the first and the third part of the aorta. While diseases like Takayasu arthritis, they are restricted to the first part of the aorta. Similarly, diseases in the gastrointestinal system like colon cancer they have different presentations according to whether they are the colon cancer is in the mid-gut region, that is the right colon cancer, or in the hindgut, that is the left colon cancer. Also, we know that histologically, the elastin-collagen ratio is different in the suprarenal aorta as compared to the infrarenal aorta. So, there are drastic changes that are happening at places where embryonic origins of the blood vessels or the intestine are taking place. And my hypothesis is that autonomic innervation is probably the reason that these changes are taking place. For now, we have come to know that the nervi vasorum and the enteric nervous system rise from the neural crest cells. Second, that embryonic origin of those neural crest cells is important in determining the outcome. Third thing that is very important to know is what kind of lesion is it, whether it is a preganglionic lesion or a postganglionic lesion. So an example of preganglionic lesion would be like a spinal cord injury. So a spinal cord injury will present with a neurogenic shock kind of presentation, where the patient will go into paralytic ileus, as well as there will be bradycardia with low blood pressure. Ganglionic or postganglionic lesion would be something like Hirschsprung's disease or duodenal atresia or post-stenotic dilatation in blood vessels. So we see that according to the innervation, the kind of defect, whether it is a preganglionic lesion or a postganglionic lesion, we can have different presentations, and this is what I wish to emphasize upon, because in determining the histopathology and the treatment, it is very important, I believe. An example that I would like to give is of the neurogenic bladder. As a result of the spinal cord injury, there are different presentations from the bladder at different levels of the spinal cord injury. We know that S2, S3, S4, from where the pelvic splanchnic nerves arise and the parasympathetic innervation to the bladder arises, gives a different outcome as compared to a higher spinal cord injury. So the level of spinal cord injury is important in determining the changes, histopathological changes in the tissue, whether it is vascular or it is gastrointestinal. This is a basic outline of how enteric nervous system and nervi vasorum are similar tissues, the similar origin and similar embryological origin, and they have similar presentations in histopathology.